Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be doing a design of a pair of earrings and a knotted necklace. I thought it would be interesting to do a video that was not just a how-to on how to create these things, but also how to design them and pick out the elements that you're going to use in the creation. There's no wrong or right way to do it. Everybody approaches it differently. Some people will spill out a ton of beads on the table and just start putting things together and seeing what they like. Some people might start with a specific element and build around that. And then there's others that it all depends, and we'll do a mix of either. And they all get you to the same place, which is some really great jewelry. So for today, we're going to start with a bead. This bead is a Czech glass bead, and it is kind of in a diamond shape with rounded edges. And its coloring, I don't know how well it's coming out on the camera, but its coloring is kind of like that mustard yellow and then a deep kind of maroon mahogany red swirl. And I liked this shape bead for earrings. And it came in and this particular bead came in a package of 4. So I have 2 for a set of earrings. And then 2, I'm gonna, later on, I'm gonna show you how we're gonna use it in the knotted necklace. But it started with the shape. I really liked the shape, and then came the color. I've actually have this beads in a couple different colorways, but I really liked the mustard color and the maroon color together. It was very autumny, and I love autumn colors. What I didn't realize when I bought it is that part of the reason why I like this is that it reminds me of another favorite bead, a gemstone, which is mukate. And so as we start to build out this earring, mukate jasper is this wonderful gemstone that has the maroon colors and the mustard yellows, and you can find some dusty purples and creams in there. It just has a wonderful array of autumn colors that I love, and so whenever I can, I try to snatch up some mukate and add it to my stash. So I have it in a lot of different sized rounds and in some chips and nuggets and things like that. So I thought for this purpose, I would put, what I wanted to do is I wanted to really, for the earrings, I wanted to play up the maroon scroll and really help bring that out. So I went into my stash and I looked at some of the different sized mukate that I have, and because I'm making a pair of earrings, I wanted 2 rounds for each earring. I had to pick out 4 rounds total in this that had predominantly the kind of maroon red in it. And I started out by kind of lining them up and just stacking them one on top of the other. And while I was happy with my choice for the 2 rounds, I felt that the bead needed something. It needed a little something extra. In this case, I really felt it needed something between the rounds. And so I had considered a couple different things. I had considered another shape like a bicone crystal or a rondelle, but I really didn't want to go the crystal route. I wanted to kind of really keep this looking as natural as possible. and not add in any crystal element to this particular piece. So what I decided it needed was a pop of metal, and I wanted to maintain the warmth of the colors that were in there. And there were a couple different options that I could have gone metal wise to do that. I could have done just straight out gold. I could have done copper, and or more of like a brass color. And what I landed on was to do an antique brass in a rondelle. So I felt that that added what it was missing, and I looked through my stash to find something that I really liked this, because it looked a little like a scroll, which was in keeping with the design here. This is more of like an antiqued brass or an antiqued gold, so it maintains that somewhat muted look that's going on with these deeper colors. I was concerned that going with just straight gold, it would be too shiny, too bright, and copper just wasn't the right fit for this. At least that was my opinion. Now again, this is my process, and what I was thinking as I was going through creating this. You may have a totally different take on this and a totally different idea, and that's totally fine. Because we all look at things differently, and you could take some of these elements and rework them and make a completely different piece that's going to be lovely. So this is just about how I went through my thought process of putting something together. So I had my beads here, and it's looking pretty good, but I felt that it needed a little more length, and that anything I added to it now needed to be on the smaller side, because I've got some pretty chunky beads here. Everything's kind of starting to look a little boxy, even though it's got some decent definition. Whatever I did, I wanted some smaller beads. I also didn't want to necessarily do maroon again. I felt like I represented that color well up here, and that the smaller beads could help bring out the yellow in this bead. So I went back to my Mouquet stash, and I had these teeny tiny little yellow beads in the mustard. And so I decided I wanted the smaller beads to encompass the larger set of Mouquet. And so that is basically the design of the earring. And a little later in this video, I'm going to show you how to put it together. It's going to be a basic earring design of stringing these on to some metal head pins or eye pins, and doing a simple loop to attach the strung piece to the ear wire. And we might work with some jump rings. So that'll be a little later in this video. But now I want to shift my attention on to the necklace. So we're back to the same yellow check beads with the swirl. I've got another set that I'm going to use in a matching necklace for the earrings. And again, there were some options and considerations that I had to make before I even started laying out any more beads, and certainly before I ended up stringing anything. One of my options is that I could do an entire beaded necklace with the Mouquet jasper and the kind of antique brass rondelles. And the more I thought about it, I really didn't want to do that. I really wanted to do something that would allow, again, these beads to really stand out, and that would be a little more delicate than doing an entire strand of gemstones with these two beads flanking either side. So what I came up with was that I wanted to do a knotted necklace. And you can use a lot of different types of stringing material for knotted necklaces in all different diameters and colors. And so I have a very good stash of Eslon or Ceylon cord in 0.5 millimeters. Let's zoom out here a little bit. And so I pulled a couple different colors. To see what might look best, because the idea with a knotted necklace is that you do some groupings of beads and then you leave some of the stringing material bare in between doing your next grouping of beads. So it's not a fully beaded necklace. And I have done knotted necklaces that have done 3 to 5 different groupings of beads, and the groupings themselves are relatively small as well. There's only maybe 3 to 5 beads in a grouping as well. So I had a bunch of different colors, and I kind of picked out between the extremes on both ends with the red and the yellows, and then it really for me came down between these two. And what I ultimately decided on was that this color really brought out kind of the rusty red color in this bead and would look nice up against the mouquet bead. So these will go back in the bin. So before I even cut any thread, I want to plan out my necklace, which means I want to plan out how many groupings and what beads are in each grouping. And I already know that I want at the very least to have at least 3 groupings with a grouping on either side that has these check beads. So they're going to sit right here. I've got some of my bigger bouquet jasper beads. And I've got the little ones too. Now, I was rather particular with the earrings to make sure that the beads that I chose were very matchy-matchy and all pretty much had the right amount of red in them. And while I still want to kind of keep things a little matchy-matchy in a necklace, I have a little more leeway, because the symmetry in most respects on the necklace is really going to come from the placement of the beads and how many I use, and not so much the color. I mean, I know I want to have 2 kind of reddish beads here and not a red and a yellow, because that would be too asymmetrical. And I want to mimic the design of having, oops, the rondelle in there. And then I'm going to choose 2 little yellow to cream beads. And then what I want to do, so that's right now, that's looking like it's going to be my center grouping. And I may come back to this, but now I want to work on this grouping. So and right now I don't have all my rondelles out, but basically I'm going to have the rondelle here and here, and then I'm going to do something similar over here. And you can kind of see that of some of the yellow beads, some of them are looking more like they're in the cream color, and that's fine. That's where I have a little bit of leeway because it's all going to look good in the project. And that's part of working with gemstones, is that you're never getting anything that's, they're all a little different. And that's what's great about them. So for the most part, I'm happy with this. I do need to go find my rondelles and flesh out this a little bit more, but I am happy for the most part with this. But I think what I want to do is bulk out this center part a little bit more. And so what I'm going to do is I'll put some rondelles in between these two. And I think that makes this center section look more substantial than it did and will hold up to what we did here. And I haven't measured my spaces here exactly, but there's a technique for measuring your your spaces between knots on your cord that I will show you momentarily. But basically what I'm thinking is that I want an inch, at least an inch in between of cording showing in between my knots. And I could knot in between each and every bead, but I don't think I'm going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to string on the grouping, knot at each end, create my space, do a knot, add my grouping of beads, whoops, create another knot. And I'm happy with keeping this to 3 groupings. You may choose in your project to do another grouping on each side, bringing it up to 5. And that's totally fine. I've done groupings of 5 to bring it up higher, to bring the beads up higher. And then I've done others where I've left a lot of the strand that really kind of goes more over the collarbone and the shoulder bare. But you do want to decide where you want to put your knots, and if you want to do knots just flanking the ends of the groupings, or if you want to do knots in between every single bead, because the more knots you make, the more cording you're going to need to cut off in order to accommodate all those knots. If you want an 18-inch necklace, you are not going to be cutting off 18 inches of cord. You're going to be cutting off like probably 3 feet of cord in order to accommodate all of your knots. And you also want to determine what type of knot. Are you going to do a single knot, a double knot, or a triple knot? Because a triple knot takes up more cord than a single knot. And there are videos out there on YouTube that go over the math. So I'm not going to go over that in this video, but there are some great videos that cover the math. What I will do is show you how to test out your cording on your beads. So this is a sample cord that I had cut off from another project. I actually have an entire little bin of different cords. Some of it is the Eslon 0.5 millimeters, and then some of it is, I have 1 millimeter rat tail, and some is 0.8 millimeter knotted cord. And what I did was, in each instance, I did a single, a double, and a triple. And what I'm testing for, first and foremost, is can I get the cord through the bead? So sometimes part of the reason why it doesn't go in, because I had tested these before I even did this video, but part of it is that you want to cut your cord off at a bit of an angle. The other piece of this is that you want to run it through some beeswax to prevent fraying. So I'm just coating the cord. You can see that brings things to a bit of a finer tip. And forgive me because I'm trying to record doing this, but I can't really see too well doing it through the camera. Well, So, good lesson. I thought I had tested this out on all my beads, but while it will go through the larger beads, I cannot seem to get it to go through these smaller beads. It's just the hole is too small and the thread is too thick. And it just won't go through. So, stay tuned because I'm going to have to come up with an alternative to these smaller beads for this necklace. All right, so clearly these little beads are not going to work, and that sometimes happens. And that's why you have to test the cord before you really get started on a project, because you might have to rethink your design. So, but testing them out on these bigger beads, we test that one, it will go through the hole. And then remember those knots that we made? We made a single, a double, and a triple. Then we want to test what size knot we need to hold the bead in place. So this is actually going right over the single knot, so we're not going to use that. So now we're going to test it on the double knot. And it takes some effort, but even that kind of goes over. But the triple knot is staying in place. So it looks like we'll use a triple knot technique when making this necklace. We already know that the string will go through this bead. And we will just test to see if I can get my camera to focus. Come on. Sometimes with these longer beads, the challenge is that thread will go in the hole, but when they're longer and hollow inside, sometimes it just gets caught up in there, and it takes a couple tries to get it to go through. Okay, I took this off camera for a second to experiment. What I ended up doing was taking the bead that was over in the earring set and trying it out, and that seemed to go through. And I also cut off a new piece of cord, just a little piece to make sure it would go through. So it did go through. Again, sometimes there's no rhyme or reason why one works and the other doesn't, even though they're supposedly the same bead. But again, it's a lot of beadwork is you go in with a plan, and then it's trial and error, and that's why you just take your time, you test everything out. You kind of almost look at it like a science experiment, and swap out different elements to see what might be the problem. And you may end up concluding that just it's a total design flaw between the different elements and it's not going to work. And I was almost to that point, except that I had done necklaces like this before. And sometimes you have to swap out elements. So like the element that we're going to swap out is we're clearly not going to be able to use these small beads because the hole is just too small. It doesn't matter how much we wax the end of the cord or cut it on an angle, it just won't go through. It did once off camera, but it's just not doing it consistently enough. So we simply won't use this element. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to do the design without the small beads. I don't think there's a, we could try to add in another metal element. I wouldn't want to try to add in another stone, and I don't have any other types of mookaite jasper in shapes and sizes that would balance and work with this. So we're just simply going to remove the smaller stone and not replace it with anything. And the nice thing is that in a knotted necklace, that totally works, because you only need a very small amount of beads to create these little groupings, because the whole idea is that the cord shows through. So it's not like you have to have enough beads to string an 18-inch necklace. We're going to take our cord and we're going to cut off what we need for the necklace. Now, as you saw with our little test, there's a lot of trimming of the ends when they get frayed. It also takes up some length when you're doing the knots. So you need to account for that when you pull off your length of string, because if you want, let's say, an 18-inch necklace, you're going to need something like 3 feet of cording in order to accommodate for all the length that's going to be taken up by trims and knots and things like that. And what I want to do is I want to start with my center grouping. And just string on the beads. And if it starts to fray a little bit, you can, before you go and trim it, you can try twisting it and pulling it together to bring the pieces together and see if that helps. So I'm going to need to trim a little bit off, and that's all you need to do. You need to trim it off just a little bit off to get beyond the fray. So that is what's going to be the center cluster. So now what we want to do is we want to bring both ends of our stringing material together. We want to get them even. And we want to let these beads drop down and center themselves. And then we want to take a clamp. Just to one side to hold beads in place. And I'm using this little bead bug clamp, but you can use, I've also used binder clips, which work really nice. But just to hold it in place, so that way we can make a knot on this side, and then we're going to remove the clamp and make a knot on this side. And that's going to hold our center cluster together. So when you're going to make your knot, you want to have either a pair of pliers or a pair of tweezers, so that way you can grab where you want your knot to go, because otherwise it's going to end up being more haphazard if you use your fingers, and it won't necessarily go snug up against the beads, which can mess up your, which can basically mess up your layout and spacing. So what we're going to do is we're going to just we're going to make a loop, and we're going to come up and through the loop like we normally would if we were to tie a knot. But now what we're going to do is we're going to go through the loop and grab right here, right where the knot is to go up against the bead. And then we're going to pull, well, first we're going to untangle. All right, we're going to try that again. That did not work out the way that I had hoped. Well, you're just getting to see all the things that can go wrong with a project here on this video. So again, go through the loop, grab the base of the cord, and then you're going to pull, and you see how that loop is forming and pulling tight around where you grabbed with your pliers. And then you want to just gently remove your pliers and pull. And now you have a nice little knot. Except now as I'm doing this, I realized I should have done a triple knot, so I'm just going to fix that by doing a double on top of a single. Not sure that that's really great technique, but I'm never going to get that knot out that I just made. And now we're going to do the same thing on this side, but we're going to remember to actually do a triple knot. So with a triple knot, we go through our loop, one, two, three times. We come through our loop with the pliers and grab the base of the bead. It always helps if we just, again, make sure to push them down towards that knot here, because we want the knots to be very snug up against each other. Then we grab the tail and carefully pull it so that way the loop closes around the tip of the plier. We remove the plier and then we press down and pull down. Okay, so I actually had to take this off camera because I realized that I did not do my pattern correctly, and I had a yellow bead outside here instead of in between two red beads, and I could not get the knot off. So basically I cut it apart, got new string, and re-knotted. Again, you're learning all the things that can go wrong in a project here in one video. But it's all stuff that you can come back from. It can be frustrating, but you can come back from it. So now what we're going to do is we want to measure, because I only want my clusters to be about 1 inch apart, so I want 1 inch gap in the cord. And through one of my beading groups, I was given this great trick that you take straws and you measure out how long you want your gap to be. So this is a 1 inch piece of straw. And then you want to cut down the center so that way you can easily take it off once you've made your knot. So we're going to thread through the straw here. And it's going to come, you don't really want it to cover the knot, and this is the trick that I found. You want it to kind of come up to the knot, and you want your inch to start where the knot ends. And this is where, again, taking one of your bead bugs or a binder clip and simply clamping your straw into place. Because then what you're going to do is you're going to make a knot basically up against this hole coming out. And again, it's going to be a triple knot. So we're going to go around, and we're going to do 1, 2, and 3. Come through your loop with your pliers, grab as close to the straw as you can. And then make sure you keep your knot above the straw and don't let it wrap around and tie up the straw. And then pull. And now that you have a knot, you can release your clamp and you can pull your straw out, or you can also just pull it out that way. But now we have a 1-inch gap. And we have the first knot for our second cluster. So things got over here a little messed up. So what I want to do, so I hopefully don't make a mistake again and put the wrong pattern in, is I want to just arrange my beads so that way as I string, I'm just stringing them on as I want them. And my apologies if this is not coming out as clear as I'd like. The dark beads are showing up on camera to be rather dark. So I don't know that you're seeing the hole very well. I will try to fix that in editing. And then I'm kind of trying to, I'm a little more klutzy at this than I normally am, because trying to do this while viewing it through the camera is not so easy. So I'm trying to frame it in the camera and then look at it over the camera so I can see what I'm doing. All right, so the moment of truth, we'll see if we can get this to go through. There we go, went through. So even with all of the trial and error going on, this can just be a very relaxing way to spend an evening or an afternoon. I usually have music going, maybe a podcast. Okay, so that is cluster number 2. And before we knot it on, we want to double check and make sure that everything's laying the way that we want, that our pattern is the way that we want. We didn't string it on incorrectly. That was the mistake I made here, and I had to redo it. So we just want to take our time and double check our work. And then we're going to go ahead and two and 3. Okay, so now, because this is the center, now we have to come along the other side here and string our other beads on. And there's all different types of stringing material that you can use. Again, this is a 0.5 millimeter Eslon or Celon. It's all the same thing. Eslon and Celon are the same. They're just different brands, but they're a nylon cord. And but there's also what's called silk rat tail, and that can come in 1 to 2 millimeters thick. It makes a much bigger knot, which also means that you would need a much bigger hole in your bead. Okay, so let's lay our work out again. So this is coming along nicely. So I'm going to do my final knot here to hold the beads in place. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to bring these two ends so that way they line up, because that creates the center. And you can see just through the process of knotting and trimming, my once even cord ends are no longer even. And that's okay, because we're going to measure things out and put on our clasp. And these are going to get trimmed. But we have plenty of cord left over to be able to do that. But first we want to figure out where we want our clasps to go. I'm using my beadboard for necklaces, and I don't want this to come down too low. But what this is going to do is it's going to tell me where on this cord I need to place my clasp. Okay, I went off camera for a second because I wanted to find a clasp and my jump rings, and since we have the kind of antique gold brass color beads in the necklace, I wanted to go with the same theme for the findings instead of like a bright gold, and copper definitely would not have been appropriate. So what we're going to do is we want to try to get this as even as possible. And because I want it to be about 18 inches long, so I want to plan to put my start my knotting for my clasps right around 17 inches. And you can see on my beadboard I've got a similar marking. I don't know if you can see that, but that's 17 and then 18 is in the middle. So in order to mark that, I'm going to take my bead bug again. Try not to shoot it across the room. And just mark that off. You could use a crimp tube, and because I don't have any in the antique brass or gold, I could decide to use just a bright gold one because it's so small. But the other thing is that what I could do is, since this is a knotting project, I could just knot right on to my jump ring. And I'm going to do a nice triple knot. And I'm using my pliers because I want to walk that knot down as close to the bead bug with my jump ring as possible. And that didn't quite work out the way that I wanted. Luckily, I didn't pull it too tight. Okay, I had to figure out the technique for knotting the jump ring on off camera. But I did do it, and I'll try to show you on the other side. But I did a triple knot, and then I did a triple knot on top of that to make sure it was secure. And I'm going to trim this off later. And I went ahead and I measured to the 17-inch point on the other side and clamped it down with my bead bug, so I know where to put my next jump ring. And then I moved the bead board because it was really creating some problems with the camera not fitting so I could film. So we're going to string on, wow, get into focus. Okay, so let's see what I ended up having to do, because you need to make sure that it's going to wrap around. It's going to wrap around the jump ring. Hold the jump ring. You want to get it inside the loop. 1, 2, 3. So you want to slowly pull, because you want to make sure that that jump ring is traveling with the knot and it's going to be held in place by the knot. That's the only tricky part. And it is, so we're going to pull nice and tight. And then, just to be on the safe side, 3. We're going to do another triple knot on top of that. And then to really secure things before you trim the excess, because this is nylon, you can melt the knot onto itself. You could also just add glue, but okay. And you don't have to leave the flame on for very long. And that's why you don't leave the flame on for very long. Sometimes burning the ends doesn't pay off. Okay, so all is not lost. We're just going to take off the old knot. And we're going to do hopefully at least a double, if not a triple. And because we've already measured, and this is basically the end of this is at the 17 mark, we want to kind of walk that knot as close to the edge as possible and pull tight. We will not be trying to melt this. I see people do that all the time on YouTube and Facebook, and they must have a technique down, or they're working with much thicker material, so it really does take practice. So I'm just opening and closing the jump ring with my pliers. You twist open and closed, you don't pull. 3, and you see ending a necklace or bracelet can be done with a little bit of material, but it's always good to leave more than you need. I'm walking that up as close to the edge as I can. Pull tight. And then what I want to do is I just want to open up the jump ring on one side so I can add my clasp. And you really want to check and make sure that that jump ring, those ends are together. And that way, this will go in like this. Might just need to pull this out a little bit with your plier. And we have a finished necklace. Okay, I put together one earring off camera just to make sure that all the different findings that I had were going to work. So this is what the finished piece will look like, and this is how we're going to put it together. We're going to take a head pin, and we're going to string on our beads. And you'll notice that I had to leave the yellow one off the top because I was going to run out of room. So that was a little bit of a design change. And I have just enough room to make my loop. So I'm going to bend the pin back and then switch over to my round nose pliers and grab it at the very tip and the smallest part of the pliers and just loop it back. Straighten it out, make sure that loop comes together. And then I'm going to take my jump ring and my ear wire, and we now have a pair of earrings. This is a Czech bead and mookaite knotted necklace with earrings. I had a wonderful time beading with you today. Thanks for joining me. I hope you'll check back often, as I'll be doing other projects down the road and hopefully be sharing those with you. Thanks for watching.